Hello, everyone, and thanks, Caleb, and Justine, for the introduction. So I don't know really what to say, If you're that well received, that's obviously a good thing, for ReversingLabs, and for the team in general. They're very much, proud, of, what they're doing. So I'm also very lucky to have been invited to be the first, presenter in this inaugural series of, talks. And I'm, very happy, to be able to say a few words, about, our journey at, ReversingLabs. So I'll share, some sort of, actually lots of pictures. There'll be very few, if no words, here at all. Just a lot of pictures, illustrating, our growth, illustrating, how we focused, on, product quality, how we build, our organization. Now, we are really not, your typical unicorn company that, comes, from zero to unicorn in 1, 2, 3 years. We really should be a different kind of, exemplary path, that, we have taken. Something that's, more frugal, more cost efficient, that, eventually sort of, when, there was a product moment, that, allowed us to really kind of expand and build, type of the organization that, our venture and, private equity community would, expect. And, this path is obviously not, easy, not straightforward. There's lots of changes, on the way that you may want to undertake. There's lots of things you don't know. And, you certainly, should assume that when you start this journey, there'll be a lot of things you don't know. There'll be a lot of wrong things that, you will be doing. There'll be a lot of places where you will be trying to fix, what has been broken, and, get yourself, on the right path. One thing that, has always sort of, gotten us through, and that was sort of, the belief in what we were doing. Security is not an easy field. If you don't believe in it, if you're not, sure what you're doing, maybe it's, easier now with, sort of, thousands of security companies, lots of money pouring into it. When we started in 2009, this was, less so, and you were really here at Black Hat, at DEF CON, if you enjoyed, learning, enjoyed the challenge of, things changing on you continually. Now, the most important, thing, I would say here is, literally dedication, to the cause, here. And, I definitely see this in lots of different, places. I'll give you sort of example. I have a 17-year-old son that was looking for internships, this summer, and he was looking for something that he is truly, truly passionate about, and then he found, himself, electric, boat company called, Navier Boat, which is in Alameda, California, where he spent the summer there because he was really into working there. No money, working from morning to night, holidays, etc. Something really, really exciting. We then sort of, moved, to Norway and, walking around the town, preparing for this talk, I really found, a bunch of other entrepreneurs, quote unquote, in different segments that were literally just as crazy as, we were security-wise, to go in areas, that nobody believed, things, mattered. Sort of, a burger joint selling, AI burgers, a French restaurant selling tacos, or another organization attempting to add, the fourth star, to their roster. But this, aside, it's really sort of important, to figure out, where your heart lays, where is your support network. For us, for ReversingLabs, our support network, was, Black Hat. We started, ReversingLabs, with, our initial presentation in, room maybe 2, even 3 times the size of this thing. We've sort of never done a big, a presentation at Black Hat. It was our, Titan engine, presentation, which is sort of now on YouTube, maybe, uploaded, in the past 12 months. This was followed by another 5 presentations where we posted a lot of open source and free tools for community basis. And our goal was to find users, that were willing to talk to us, to find like-minded souls, in our journey. You'll kind of hear sort of, how we came out with, our focus areas, in a second. But the goal for us was, to find, folks that really understand the gnarly problems that we were working on, something that, you couldn't take, to a store, sell out there. You couldn't really call a CISO or anybody else and hope, that they would really understand, what, we were talking about. So this sort of, focus on, what, we were doing was also sort of really born out of our own experiences. Me and Tomislav, my co-founder, didn't come out of nowhere. We had an idea what we wanted to. We knew that, time will come. We needed time. We deliberately did not, want to go fundraise, at this time. We've seen, how sort of, money early deployed, for, building out, go-to-market teams is a great way to burn, a lot of unnecessary, cash, and, also take away your focus from, what is the most important. Having the product that customers love, they use it, and then also, giving yourself and your own time, to the customer base, that, the most needs it. We've done that, sort of for the, first, 8, years, of the company. But, let me sort of a little bit, digress here and, sort of, tell you more about myself, and, sort of, what features, of, my own background, were conducive to finding this, very weird area of, doing, malware detection, focusing on zero-day, sort of, needle in a haystack, type of problems that would eventually drive us into something even crazier, and that's looking, the problems in very large, software supply chain, applications. Now, you got sort of, a bunch of different, pictures of me, from, very early age, on. So, well, we are all the products of, who we are, sort of, our background, our fears, our individual histories, our intellectual interests, bring us to where we are. To have a successful company, you definitely will need a support network, you will need the partners, and, put it all together to get you to something, more successful. So for me, I grew up, in what was then, former Yugoslavia until, I was the senior in high school and sort of, moved to California. I lived with a family that worked at Apple and actually sort of, worked with, one of our current investors, Alberto Yepes, from, ForgePoint, Capital. Now, I was always developing code, so this is sort of, 80s, where there's not that many developers, creating a little tax application or some kind of a sports event application, could get you as a kid, lots of, goodness. At the same time, I was very much interested in what, lots of teenagers would be, music, going out, I sort of, at the time, had ability to work at, Radio 101, which was, in Zagreb, a station that was instrumental in, sort of the regime change, from communism into democracy at the end of 80s. And I sort of brought that experience, with me to US. And, sort of those interests, once I end up in a US college at Swarthmore, I was able to do something which, only in US you could possibly do, and that's combine mathematics, computer science, and, for me, art history. Unfortunately, these are also sort of, the war years. The war in Croatia was, pretty severe experience for us at that time, and, I certainly feel for the people in Ukraine that, have seen this, 10,000 times, heavier than, what, we had to experience, at this time. But it formed us, who we are. It's, I was always, very much focused on, learning what I can, focusing on what I personally can do best. So after my college time, I sort of, did, a couple of master's degrees, focused on a PhD. outside of computer science, really trying to learn a lot of things. And interestingly enough, through sort of, doing, one, graduate program, in Jerusalem, sort of, found this, research project, in, collecting lots of data on burned documents, specifically something called Cotton Genesis in British, a library in London, before I kind of sort of realized that, I'm, too young, or let's say too old, to continue living, off of ramen, and pasta, and sort of said, like, hey, it's time to sort of, go back to technology and do something that I can. And so, my first development, experience, very important to supply chain, was, fixing other people's, binaries, at PictureTel, one of these first, audio video conferencing companies. A company that had, so many different dependencies in every package that, like, doing, the protocol testing, sort of why calls are not, connecting, was an impossible task. And sort of, with this experience, I literally ended up, moving into, as you'll see in a second, to a company named, Groove Networks, working on an encrypted peer-to-peer engine, eventually building very large databases. Back in the day, SQL Server was probably the only thing you can put in 50 to 100 million lines of anything, and have it, perform. And that sort of, allowed me to combine, my efforts, my co-founder, Tomislav, who really comes more from the reverse engineering side and, was, in his childhood, building, software protection tools like in RLPack. I'm not sure if anybody remembers this time. It was, playing around, but, RLPack eventually, it's because, of course, as a small business person, you put it, online, hope that, people download it. But, everything, that's good, has also a bad purpose. And so, dual purpose, componentry were eventually used, for distribution of, lots of, malware as well. But, the skill set was, quintessential for two of us to meet, within the confines of, Bit9 Carbon Black, where we were building this massive databases, of, trusted content, and trying to analyze binaries so that they could be put into some kind of, allow lists. But unfortunately, for Bit9, we sort of, left, at the end of 2008, the sort of, the financial crisis, and, very little tolerance, for, new features and new technology. So we left, to start, ReversingLabs in 2009. Which, sort of, brings us, to a timeline that, sort of, wanted to, show you. And timeline sort of, doesn't end up today. It's, ends up in, 2020. It's, more like, just, signposts, on where we are going, as an organization. So we started very, very small, very much, focusing on, getting enough cash, to fund the team and to continue investing, into technology. We knew that, if you want to survive, your technology has to be solid. There are thousands of companies, with many more engineers, smart people that you don't know. I mean, obviously, if you come to Black Hat, DEF CON, you're going to be meeting a lot of people, but there are always, more smart people out there that could potentially do what you're doing. So we knew we need to focus on something, and then be doing this, for a while to have, kind of a moat, as, Sasha would like to say. And be able to do bigger ideas, moving, forward. So we combined, sort of, our open source efforts, started like, bring, other developers, and we're very lucky to have, had really strong, traction, from the other security organizations, researchers, and finally, Inquitel, which sort of, very interesting organization that I would recommend, all of you considering, working with, federal government, something that, if done right, can give you access to lots of, big, projects, big, big problems, to be able to, better your solution moving forward. Now, we spent 8 years, being bootstrapped. So why in the world did we eventually decide, to take, our first, round of funding? Well, few things happen, and as it happens, they all tend to happen, all at the same time. For one, we had, one, large federal contract, and if anybody has been doing lots of, business, federally, you know that no matter how sticky you are, budgets can get cut, with no explanation. Anytime, there could be a 1 or 2 years, delay before you, get, someplace. What's really, really important, is that, you as a founder, you really are responsible for all the people working for you. And, at, 80 plus people, that's, 80 plus families that rely on us, having one large contract, dropping, was a really, really big, bad thing. This is maybe end of 2015. We started really wondering, what and how we could do. And as some of you know, whenever something bad happens, you really kind of start looking for other opportunities. More time than not, this extra effort yields, good results, and you will kind of go through this thing. But there was a scar. There was, really big fear that, this kind of, situations should not, happen again naturally. We need to figure out how to manage this. And we really started looking, for, other options. And, as usually happens, you end up, getting, acquisition, interest, and we were working on this, very large JP Morgan Chase deal that happened in 2017. That also required that the company eventually, gets, stronger risk, profile resistance. Meaning being just a bootstrapped company by a couple of guys and maybe, 80 of their friends, some living in Zagreb, Croatia, other living, in Boston, was potentially not the greatest, thing. What we didn't really realize that, and which is not on this chart, is that in end of 2016, we had, very important elections in this country that will change, a lot of things around. And by a lot of things around, I mean, lots of, funding projects, federally. Something that, we didn't, particularly, know about because, the last contested election was in 2008, even before we started the company. So for us, something we completely didn't pay attention. Out of nowhere, end of 2016, you had to start wondering your entire book of business potentially could disappear or simply will not get paid out, 1 or 2 years, later. So we really decided then, that, perhaps, it's really good, to have, stronger backers that could potentially put more cash in the balance sheet so you can weather, this, type of situations. Now, I'll kind of stop with the timeline for a second, come back, in a second. There's something sort of, fun that was happening in those early years. As we were doing open source, projects, really, I mean, we were emailing and working with, performers, analysts. We worked, on a couple of DARPA projects with Mudge, applied, for different, awards. And there was, one particular award, that we applied for, which was, assigned at 16. 16 companies in 2011 picked, as winners, and, we were one of them. What's really, really interesting, and I'm really putting this out, as a sort of a signal not to give up and, not to get, flustered or afraid of the winners. And 2 winners that were there that year were, FireEye and, Duo. Which is awesome. I mean, they did, fantastically well. Both are sort of success stories, and of course, I want to hear, what John has to say shortly. But this doesn't speak of the 13 companies, that are not ReversingLabs, that are not Fire, they're not Duo, that didn't do quite well, in that year. For us, we were really interested in the risk mitigation. We wanted to be there for a long time, but we didn't want to sort of, burn out, quickly moving, forward. Now, this led us to Inkitel, led us to some activities, and then the same year we were able to put our first, Black Hat, booth. And this is just sort of, some pictures of, how that, looked like, much smaller than our booth, out there today. But also super interesting, you see some strange, products. Looks like, hardware. We were actually thinking about, bundling our stuff around hardware. 10 plus years, ago, a lot of people were thinking about hardware. A lot of people were, thinking about parallel computing, NVIDIA CUDAs. That was certainly not the right path. The world has certainly been beaten by AWS's, Azure's, of the world, sort of software-only stack, highly elastic, and the such. Now, that's okay. You will be making, mistakes. There's always shiny lights, really great technology you want to follow that you're going to have to, pull back. This was a very expensive, side project for us as a small organization. But one thing that it did really well is, it really required innovation from all the team members that we have. And they took it really well. They really loved it. And as you can see here, somehow I found a picture of, one of the guys that was, super excited that, and we were like really two-year company. He took the ReversingLabs shirt to Himalayas. He wanted to be there, to show what, we can do. Now, with that, so obviously few people, you're remote, even back then, we were remote. You have to start, putting, together the offices, no matter how expensive it is. And, being, sort of, dual-homed, US, Croatia, US obviously is always expensive. So, we tried to find out the cheapest possible, place, in East Cambridge, in Boston. You see kind of, our office, early, 2002. The building on the right, it's a barrister's building right across from the courthouse in East Cambridge. It's not, it's not, the most luxurious, the office space you could possibly find. That same day, the team from Ambient, came in because we were sort of already trying to, cook up, something as a partnership. They came on and they're like, wow, this looks exactly like, the first Mandiant office, maybe only 3-4 years before that. But, fun trivia about this one. The first floor of this thing, doesn't look particularly pretty. Used to be a bar, where Whitey Bulger used to, run the shop, across from the courthouse. For our team in Croatia, we effectively did something, quote unquote fancier. They were living in an apartment. Then they moved into sort of, slightly bigger apartment, vacant, vapid, not much stuff there. We didn't have too much money for furniture, but, we had money for, plastic lines and sort of, a little bit of, design work, and, all of a sudden there was, lots of fun stuff there. My family, which was obviously a critical part, of, giving me support, and, I'm sure you all know that, strong, spouse, strong family support, when you're doing something so crazy that takes all of your time every weekend, no holidays, ever, is a really, really exciting thing. And so you want to share with them, let's say, a new office, lots of, exciting things. And, obviously, they were happy along, with, our engineers. Now, important thing is so what was that driving force, other than reverse engineering, looking for malware that, we really, were after. And so one should really try to think, what is that really important problem that, perhaps never will be solved, or perhaps is going to take really a lot of hard time, to work. And me and Tomislav at Bit9 have realized that, trusting software is a really, really difficult proposition. Collecting hashes, great, but it's very fragile. There's lots of, unknown, components. There's lots of things you simply don't know. And, when you overwhelm people with lots of, data, they eventually just, accept, approve everything. Sort of, sounds sometimes, like a, modern SOC process. Just say, click yes to continue. Now, I'm not sure how many of you see sort of, my circled piece. So this data is from 2007, I believe. So this is the research that Ben Edelman did. Later on, me and him did a presentation at DEF CON that went deeper into prevalence of spyware and malicious applications that were abusing code signing system. So code signing system has been with us forever. It was there to convince you that something is trustworthy and okay. And so back in the days, and this is, I guarantee you, still a viable attack vector. Is an example vendor registered the company called click yes to continue corporation, and getting your own certificate. Totally valid thing, and signing whatever you want to. It will get presented for a user, and you can totally social engineering user to install just about anything out there. This is nothing new. Now, also to other news, also nothing new. Certificates were being stolen from Adobe, Bit9, for 10 plus years. It started getting interesting, but something really, really important, happened, after that really sidetracked us, until effectively SolarWinds. With SolarWinds, out of nowhere, I mean, obviously it's a geopolitical, connection, sort of, the elections in the U.S., the emerging war, in Ukraine, and suddenly new administration trying to really elevate the national resilience to another level, that we started talking about, problems, like this. And really sort of, what changed was, the APT1 report, from, Mandiant, in 2013. Out of nowhere, a lot of this interest with like, hey, let's work on resilience. Let's sort of, empower our IT organizations that were installing firewalls, endpoint products. Let's start, looking for those things that industry simply cannot, protect us. And since obviously we got the development, of threat intelligence, SOC teams, all kinds of complexity that, modern response, looks like, today. Now, from a company building perspective, so what did this to us? We were building a product with our trust building software analysis products were successful from 2009 to 2013. Our largest customer had maybe 4,000 servers under operation. 4,000 servers, if you sort of count, 40 use, per stack, that's, a lot of cabinets. That's effectively entire new building that needs to be built, to run the operation. That all sort of changed, towards, let's, scan, lots of endpoint data, lots of files, and looking for those anomalous, unique things, that, have behaviors or other issues that the incident responders, forensics analysts, hunters could do to do there. Now we continue working on the very same framework. So I think very important is that when you're building your infrastructure, there is a continuity, there is a reuse. Even maybe you're not using part of your IP, part of your intelligence. Keeping it there, is really great, because security is literally like a fashion business. It changes every year. There's every year. I mean, I guess, with RSA and Black Hat, we could say that we have, two shows, the spring and the fall show, going on, and the messages, topics, issues change. Of course, we are also very much influenced by the, geopolitical or economic, forces. So there will be lots of, change, going on. So things will, come. So in sort of, that, famous quote, that's not really attributed to Sun Tzu, but everybody quotes about it. If you really wait for something, or if you sit, next to the river, the bodies of the enemies will eventually flow by. So in security, the attacks return, forms of the attacks return, and maybe other modified versions, but that will return. And in our case, with Sunburst, we were effectively, having, in front of us, a tooling, that, can analyze this, advanced implants, take the entire SolarWinds Orion, which is 5 GB plus, package, get the last 10 versions, look for changes in behaviors between them, and find one anomalous, really weird component, and then literally explain when the attacker first modified it, added extra code, added more code, and then finally added the interesting implant. That event itself was so major so it was such a major product moment for us that we were able out of nowhere to raise our Series B with a private equity fund called Crosspoint Capital, with a phenomenal team of people who actually understand security, and really sort of give us the ability to create a new capability that all of a sudden started working with all the people with this type of problems. Sort of the SolarWinds, 3CX. I'm not going to name some of the others, but like they were all in the press, so you can sort of imagine where that goes. Now, to kind of change the attack, this sort of brings us to success. And by this I really mean an HBO series that was directed by Dani Stanovic, Oscar-winning film director. It was first released in Europe. You could probably find it now on Max in US as well. The funny thing is it was filmed in Zagreb, Croatia. And as we were sort of looking for our Series A and sort of growing as a company, we ReversingLabs moved into this brand new big building, and we were also as a kind of new tenants able to put our logo on it. And some of you that have traveled through Europe, have ever hit the bus station in Zagreb, probably walked out the bus station and saw ReversingLabs above it. I've been getting through over years, pictures from random people, seeing our logo someplace Eastern Europe. But the funny thing is, as the series closes out, the sort of the camera pans out, and there's a big ReversingLabs logo on the top. That was definitely super hit, for our engineers, in Croatia. And as it happens, with sort of extra money, we really wanted to make sure that we share that with our team. So in 2018, we moved this very growing team in new offices, more money. Now you can start looking like a real company. And so for us, this is sort of 9 years later, we were able to provide for our engineers in Croatia something that in their words started looking like Google, Facebook, or other things. I'm sure you all have seen that, especially with the younger team members. There's a lot of sort of the online activity. There's lots of Googling, and people are trying to figure out like, hey, Dropbox has a private chef there. Like, when are we going to have that? Like, sorry, that's not our reality moving forward. Anyway, so you can also see that I also wanted to make sure that, for my part, I include, my family in every improvement, that the company was making. And that's why you've seen my kids, and my wife, all throughout, the pictures. They were very much, part of, what, we were doing. It was really sort of the family pride, because, all the stress that was happening, in the company, they were aware of, and, they were willing to support, to be part of it. And of course, touch all the other employees to show them that, they're not alone, and that the management is not cold, and not, distant, from them. I think with this, I will close this talk and I think open it for questions. I'm not quite sure if I have 7 minutes for questions or just for a session. Thank you. Oh, there is a... Is that John? Oh,
yeah,
no.
Hey, Mario.
Hey, John.
Just curious, what was the scariest part of the journey for you? Like, where'd you feel the most peril or stress?
Oh, that was that, when we decided to do Series A. I mean, really, we were looking at probably 30% of our revenue dropping in one deal. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, this is, I don't know if there's enough time, to do something like that, So to me, that was, I mean, obviously there's all kinds of scary moments, sort of, you start worrying about, the patent trolls, you start spending a lot of money on patents, and, people contest it. Certainly, like, dropping revenue, it's, it's a really, really scary thing. And then, when we saw, what was going to happen with elections, we were really freaked out, and we were very lucky that we were already in the process of, figuring out, stability. Of course, business-wise, a lot of things, sort of look worse than they are at the time. But I mean, you have to, be scared, in advance. If you're not, worrying about things, ahead of it, you definitely, will get, hit by a bus.
So the presentation ended in 2018. We're in 2023. What worries you for the next 5 years? As a founder of the company, geopolitics. You said we have the 2 fashion shows. Security is always changing. How do you handle that as a founder? How do you project the next 5 years?
Of course, it's tough, and so and as you sort of have more stakeholders, more different investors, they tend to have their own ideas, especially ideas around growth. Are most difficult to sort out. I mean, in terms of just why we stopped. I really wanted to talk about sort of bringing us out of nothing and getting us on a path that's a lot more interesting. So I wanted to kind of stop and sort of somewhere historically. But company is sort of definitely growing. We have never had a bigger booth that we have right now at at the Black Hat. The organization has grown, but so have the risks. Now, with risks, we all know that we are effectively getting super scared literally every month. So COVID. It's bad, it's good, well, it's not so bad, then sort of, recession, inflation, this or that, We just, a couple months ago, we're sort of, all, talking about, rules of the 40, the sort of, clamping down, really sort of, figuring out, how to lock down the finance, Now things are sort of looking up, tomorrow they may looking, again, a bit dire. So I think, what we're going to be seeing is a much stronger focus, on actually what we should be doing, and that's, and that's what I also want to go back to our old model, being really close to our customers. What can we do for them? Because if we make them survive some of these incidents, we will do well. You mentioned geopolitics. Geopolitics is pretty weird today. So we have really no idea what is going to happen. So if anybody's reading any news, Russia, China, a lot of crazy things may happen, on a day-to-day basis. Our economy, as we know, will probably be radically changed. If things like that happen, you want to have, friends. By friends, I mean customers that rely on you, that will tell you what they need, to continue surviving. And that may sort of, mean, changing features, here and there. But certainly, would allow you to sort of, provide that, air that we breathe, to move forward. I mean, it's as my friend from Bit9, Drew Houston, who later on was the, became the founder of, Dropbox. It, never gets easier. It always gets different.
What kind of challenges did you have with client acquisition, and how did you overcome them?
Sorry. Oh, there you go. Can you repeat that again?
What kind of challenges did you have with client acquisition, and how were you able to overcome them?
What client acquisition challenges? Security is tough, I mean, and I'd say the biggest challenge, especially for a lot of the small organizations here, is getting that half an hour of proper conversation with your clients. Since there's thousands of companies, thousands of snippets, look eventually very similar, and they are completely different, from any needs that customer actually has. When you look on the customer side, you really have to try to understand who are these people, where they came from. Are they technologists that are coming from risk? This is for security. Do they like big stories? Do they like details to make themselves comfortable? After that, you really want to know sort of how they are thinking their job should be successful, because they're likely not being told how to operate successfully. They have to figure it out. So people go look for the regulatory frameworks, go to conferences. Frequently, they talk to us, the vendors, because they want to learn something from us, hoping that, our 5, 10, 20 years of experience in the industry could help them figure out, how things go. But, the verbiage can be differently described. Their problems are not something that, me and you perhaps, know how to deal with. Large organizations have, regulators, have politicians, have crazy boards, have all kinds of financial experience that you literally need to spend a life learning to really understand, why they matter for them. Therefore, it does take longer to have this conversation so you could sort of, see eye to eye, for them. I don't think that's, difficult. As you get larger, it gets, slightly easier, that's for sure. Look at, companies like, CrowdStrike. It used to be very, complicated product. But as the company was growing, as it was ubiquitous everywhere, it was almost by fiat, accepted by everybody, whether they understand what the full platform is doing or not.
Thanks for sharing your story. Really appreciate hearing the bootstrapping and then growing, what you've been able to do. Curious your thoughts in the modern environment, like you just mentioned, with the thousands of different vendors, all the money flowing in. You think it'd still be possible to bootstrap a company today, try to start a new cybersecurity venture?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and probably more successful than we were able to do back in the day. I think people are very much open. When there's thousands of companies, there's obviously thousands of business models, and not always you get to work with founders that will find time for you as a customer. And if you talk to any of these high-ranked people, they buy things day in, day out. They retire things day in, day out. They try things. But they really appreciate when somebody wants to build a relationship with them, long-term relationship, to make them successful, because things will sort of, go down. I think, there's a famous story with, Robert Herjavec, and, the shooting here in Las Vegas, that, sometimes, the customers will call you. I know this is off the books. I need help. What can you do for me to help, Those are the moments that you really sort of, should sort of, wait for. And we too, have, customers, that, are more than eager here and then is saying, we read this, we feel we are hit, what can you do for it? Can you do extra research? Just, help us out. Forget about anything else. I think, that's the way that, really you can help, and, no funding is necessary. It's really what you do as an organization for them, and that then, really pays in spades, moving forward.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In order to be really successful in cybersecurity, is it necessary to invent your own technology, or can you be successful piggybacking off of other cybersecurity solutions?
Okay, so we built our own technology, and we were more than happy to work with others who wanted to piggyback, on our technology. We were never afraid of, partnering, because, things will always sour, but getting things that work together, that's the hard thing. But once things work, that's something that's stable and good, for the future. Now, being on the other side, you definitely want to make sure you have some kind of defendable IP. If your product is not very well installed, very well understood by our customers, they will be looking, for alternatives. And if you don't, have, too much protection built into what you do, you're adding so much risk, to the equation that, you may really, run into, the cash, positions, and certainly the worst thing could happen, you have a down round in the end.